The gentle spring breeze carried the sound of childhood laughter across the well-kept lawn. 11-year-old Jordan Taylor was lost in his own world, kneeling in the grass of his front yard, completely focused on the bright red remote-controlled car that zipped back and forth across the concrete driveway. The afternoon sun warmed his back as he adjusted the controls, making the car spin in perfect circles before racing it toward the mailbox and back. "Let's see how fast you can really go," Jordan whispered to himself, pushing the small joystick forward. The car shot across the lawn, leaving tiny tracks in the freshly cut grass. His mother had told him to stay in the yard, but he wasn't worried. Their home in this quiet Washington, D.C. suburb was as safe as could be. At least that's what his parents always said. The Taylor family's two-story brick home stood proudly among similar houses on Magnolia Street. American flags hung from several porches and recycling bins lined the curbs. It was Tuesday after all. Jordan loved this neighborhood, especially now that spring had arrived, bringing with it longer days perfect for outdoor adventures. Inside the house, Jordan's mother, Diana, stood at the kitchen window, keeping an eye on her son while preparing dinner. The rich smell of her famous pot roast filled the air as she chopped carrots and potatoes. Every few minutes, she'd glance up from her cutting board to check on Jordan, smiling at his obvious delight with his birthday present. The remote-controlled car had been a gift from his father just last weekend, and Jordan had barely put it down since. That boy would sleep with that car if we let him, Diana thought, shaking her head with a smile. She wiped her hands on her apron and reached for her phone to check the time. Her husband, Congressman Robert Taylor, had texted earlier to say he'd be home late. Again. The House Judiciary Committee was in session, debating a new police reform bill that Robert had co-sponsored. As one of the few black congressmen on the committee, he felt a deep responsibility to push the legislation forward. "This one matters, Di," he'd told her last night as they lay in bed. "It could change things for our son's future." Outside, Jordan had no interest in politics or the important work his father was doing. At 11, his world revolved around school, friends, basketball, and now, his incredible new RC car. He'd named it Flash because of its speed, and he was determined to become the best driver in the neighborhood. "Watch out, Flash. Big turn coming up," Jordan called out, narrating his own imaginary race as the car swerved around the garden bed where his mother's tulips were just beginning to bloom. He was careful to stay away from the flowers. He'd made that mistake once before and had to spend a whole weekend helping his mother replant her garden. The neighborhood was peaceful at this time of day. Most of Jordan's friends were still at after-school activities or doing homework. A few houses down, Mr. Wilson was walking his golden retriever, and across the street, Mrs. Patel was collecting her mail. They both waved at Jordan, familiar with the congressman's son who was known for his politeness and bright smile. "Hi, Mr. Wilson." "Hi, Rusty," Jordan called out, waving back while managing to keep his other hand steady on the remote control. The old man smiled warmly. He'd lived on the street for 40 years and had watched the neighborhood change and grow. He liked the Taylor family, especially after Robert had helped him navigate some Medicare issues last year. Jordan's father often reminded him that they were fortunate to live in a place where neighbors looked out for each other. "Community matters," Robert would say during their Sunday drives around the district. "These are the people we serve." Jordan didn't fully understand what his father meant, but he knew his dad's job was important and that people respected him for it. The afternoon light began to soften as Jordan continued playing, lost in his imagination. In his mind, Flash wasn't just a toy. It was a race car, an explorer, a rocket ship. He'd created an entire storyline about Flash being a secret agent car that could transform to fight the bad guys. Jordan's teacher often praised his creative writing, saying his stories showed remarkable imagination and potential. He was so absorbed in his game that he didn't notice the moving truck parked 2 doors down or the new family unloading boxes. The Hendersons had just moved in from a small town in Ohio, Mr. Henderson having recently accepted a job with a government contractor. They didn't know much about the neighborhood yet, or who their neighbors were. As Jordan played, Flash suddenly hit a rock and flipped over near the edge of the yard, close to where the Taylor property met the sidewalk. Jordan ran over to rescue his car, kneeling down to check for damage. "No scratches." "You're still perfect," he said with relief, brushing grass from the car's shiny surface. As he stood up, he noticed a police car driving slowly down the street. This wasn't unusual in their neighborhood, where many high-ranking government officials lived. Regular patrols were normal, and Jordan had been taught to see police officers as helpers and protectors. His father had also given him other instructions, important ones that Jordan didn't fully understand but had memorized anyway. If an officer ever speaks to you, be respectful. Keep your hands visible. Don't make sudden movements. Speak clearly. Tell them who you are and that your dad is Congressman Taylor. Jordan didn't know why his dad looked so serious when he shared these rules, or why his mom always seemed to hold her breath during these conversations. He just knew the rules were important to follow. Back at the house, Diana was setting the table when her phone buzzed with a message from Robert. Committee running late. Bill discussion heated. Should wrap by 7, love you both. She sighed and texted back a heart emoji. These late nights were becoming more frequent as Robert's influence in Congress grew. She was proud of him, of course. His passion for justice and equality, his dedication to their community. But she sometimes wished he could just be home for dinner more often, especially for Jordan's sake. Through the window, she watched her son playing and felt a surge of pride. Jordan was growing into a thoughtful, bright young man, with his father's determined spirit and her creative mind. His teachers constantly praised his intelligence and kindness. Just last week, his math teacher had called to suggest advanced placement classes for the next school year. He's got a mind for numbers, the teacher had explained, and an unusual ability to see patterns. We should nurture that. Outside, Jordan had created a makeshift obstacle course using small rocks and sticks. Flash weaved in and out of the obstacles as Jordan narrated an exciting play-by-play. And Flash takes the lead. The crowd goes wild, he announced, mimicking a sports commentator's voice. Can he hold on for the win? It's going to be close. The lengthening shadows told him his playtime would soon be over. His mother would call him in for dinner. Then it would be homework, shower, and maybe some TV if he finished everything on time. It was a comfortable routine and a comfortable life. Jordan knew he was lucky. His parents reminded him often enough. Not everyone had what they had. From his bedroom window upstairs, Jordan could see the Capitol dome in the distance on clear days. His father worked there, making laws to help people, as Jordan explained to his friends. He didn't understand the complexities of his father's job, but he knew it was important. Sometimes people recognized his dad in restaurants or at the grocery store. They would approach with respect, shake his hand, and thank him for his work. Jordan's thoughts were interrupted when Flash suddenly stopped responding correctly to the remote. The car jerked left when it should have gone right, then slowed to a crawl. Oh no, batteries! Jordan groaned, remembering his father's warning that he should always have spares ready. He picked up the car and turned it over, confirming his suspicion. The battery indicator was flashing red. He looked toward the house, wondering if he should go inside for new batteries or if it was too close to dinner time. His mother didn't like him interrupting her cooking with emergencies that could wait. As he debated what to do, he noticed the police car from earlier was now parked across the street. 2 officers sat inside, seemingly watching the neighborhood. Jordan waved politely, the way his parents had taught him to acknowledge the officers who helped keep their community safe. One officer nodded slightly in return, and Jordan felt a small sense of pride at this adult acknowledgement. With Flash tucked under his arm and the controller in his hand, Jordan headed back toward the house. The afternoon was cooling now, and his stomach was beginning to rumble. He wondered if his father would make it home for dinner tonight. He hoped so. He wanted to show him how he'd mastered controlling Flash through his obstacle course. As he reached the front steps, he looked back at his yard with satisfaction. It had been a good day. School had gone well, he'd aced his spelling test, and he'd had almost 2 full hours to play with Flash. Tomorrow, he'd bring fresh batteries and try to make Flash jump off a ramp he was planning to build. Life felt simple and good in these moments, filled with small adventures and plans for tomorrow. Jordan couldn't know that the peaceful routine of his life was about to be dramatically interrupted, or that his father's position and work would soon become more personally relevant than he could possibly imagine. For now, though, he was just a boy with a toy car, heading inside for dinner, wondering what his mom had made and if there might be chocolate cake for dessert. The world of adult concerns, politics, security, identity, and justice remained at the edges of his awareness, a distant backdrop to the immediate joys and concerns of childhood. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Jordan woke up early, excited to continue his adventures with Flash before school. His father had already left for an early meeting, but had placed a pack of batteries on Jordan's desk with a sticky note that read, "For the champion racer. Love, Dad." Jordan smiled, tucking the batteries into his backpack for after school. The school day dragged by, each minute feeling like an hour, as Jordan daydreamed about the ramp he planned to build. His science teacher noticed his distraction. "Earth to Jordan," she said with a gentle smile. "Care to share the answer with the class?" Jordan blinked, suddenly aware that everyone was looking at him. "Sorry, Miss Chen, could you repeat the question?" Some of his classmates giggled, but Ms. Chen just nodded. "The 3 states of matter, Jordan." "Can you name them?" "Solid, liquid, and gas," he answered quickly, relieved he knew this one. "That's right. And just like matter can change states, I need your attention to change from daydreaming to science class." Her voice was kind, not angry, and Jordan nodded, sitting up straighter in his chair. By the time the final bell rang, Jordan had nearly forgotten his embarrassment, his mind already racing ahead to the afternoon's plans. He hopped off the school bus and ran up his street, waving to Mrs. Patel, who was watering her flower beds. "How was school, Jordan?" she called out. "Good. Got an A on my history project," he shouted back, barely slowing down. Inside the house, he dropped his backpack on the kitchen table and grabbed a cookie from the jar his mom always kept full. Diana was working from home today on a video call in her office upstairs. She was a child psychologist, and Jordan knew not to interrupt when her office door was closed. It meant she was with a patient, even if it was just through a computer screen. He scribbled a quick note. "Playing with Flash in the yard. Did homework on the bus. Promise." And left it on the counter where his mom would see it. Then he dashed outside, the screen door banging behind him. The afternoon sun was warm on his skin as he set to work building a ramp for Flash. He'd found some scrap, wood in the garage, and an old piece of plywood that would make a perfect incline. His father had taught him basic tool safety last summer, so he felt confident as he arranged the pieces into a makeshift jump. Next door, the Pattersons' dog barked at a squirrel, and somewhere down the street a lawnmower hummed. It was a normal Tuesday afternoon on Magnolia Street, peaceful and ordinary. Jordan didn't notice the gray sedan that drove slowly past his house, or how it circled the block and passed by again. He was too absorbed in his project, carefully positioning the ramp at just the right angle for Flash to achieve maximum air. When he finally had everything set up, he placed Flash at his starting mark, a line drawn with chalk on the sidewalk, and inserted the fresh batteries his dad had left him. The red car hummed to life, its lights blinking as if eager to begin. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jordan announced to his imaginary audience, "welcome to the first annual Taylor Yard Jump Championship. Our contestant, Flash, will attempt to break the world record." He pressed the joystick forward, sending Flash speeding toward the ramp. The car hit the incline perfectly and soared through the air, landing with a slight bounce on the grass beyond. "And he sticks the landing," Jordan cheered, throwing his arms up in victory. "The crowd goes wild." He was setting up for a second jump when he noticed a man standing on the sidewalk watching him. The man was white, middle-aged, and wearing a button-up shirt with khaki pants. Jordan didn't recognize him, but that wasn't unusual. His father often reminded him that in a neighborhood like theirs, with government employees coming and going, new faces were common. "Hi," Jordan said politely, the way his parents had taught him to greet adults. The man nodded but didn't smile. "You live here?" he asked, gesturing to the Taylor house. "Yes, sir," Jordan replied. "I'm just playing with my RC car." The man looked at the house, then back at Jordan, his expression unreadable. "I haven't seen you around before." "We've lived here for 3 years, Jordan explained, suddenly feeling a strange discomfort he couldn't name. Something about the way the man was looking at him made the hair on his arms stand up. "My dad's..." But before he could finish his sentence about his father being a congressman, the man had already turned and walked away, pulling out his phone as he went. Jordan watched him go, a small knot forming in his stomach. The joy of his perfect jump faded slightly. He tried to shake off the weird feeling and went back to his game, but he found himself glancing over his shoulder more often now, aware of the man who had disappeared around the corner. After a few more jumps, Jordan decided to try a new trick, making Flash do a mid-air spin before landing. He was just about to launch the car when he heard the sound of a vehicle pulling up to the curb. Looking up, he saw a police car, its lights off but engine still running. 2 officers stepped out, both men in their 30s. The taller one had a buzz cut and sunglasses, despite the fact that the sun was now partially hidden behind clouds. The shorter officer had his hand resting casually on his belt near his holster. "Afternoon," the taller officer said, his voice neutral as he approached Jordan. "Everything okay here?" Jordan nodded, suddenly remembering his father's rules about talking to police. "Yes, sir. I'm just playing with my car." He held up the remote control as evidence. "We got a call about someone suspicious in this yard," the officer continued. "Someone who might not belong here." Jordan's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "But this is my house. I live here with my mom and dad." The shorter officer was walking around the perimeter of the yard looking at the house. "What's your name, son?" "Jordan Taylor," he answered clearly, making sure to stand still and keep the remote control visible in his hands. "And your parents? They home right now?" the taller officer asked, removing his sunglasses and hooking them on his shirt. "My mom is. She's upstairs on a work call. She's a doctor, a psychologist." Jordan pointed toward the house. "I can go get her if you want." "Stay where you are for a minute," the officer said, his tone firmer now. "We need to verify a few things first." Jordan felt his heart begin to beat faster. He hadn't done anything wrong. He was just playing in his own yard. But something about this situation felt very wrong. "How old are you, Jordan?" the shorter officer asked, returning from his circuit of the yard. 11, Jordan answered. "I'll be 12 in October." The officers exchanged a glance that Jordan couldn't interpret. The taller one spoke into his shoulder radio, but Jordan couldn't hear what he said. "Listen, Jordan," the taller officer said. "We need you to come sit in our car while we sort this out." Jordan's eyes widened. "But why? I didn't do anything wrong." "Nobody's saying you did anything wrong," the shorter officer said. "But we have a report about a suspicious person, and we need to investigate. It's procedure." Jordan thought about his father's instructions. "Be respectful, keep your hands visible, tell them who you are." "My dad is Congressman Robert Taylor," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "He's on the House Judiciary Committee. You can call him." The officers exchanged another look, but their expressions didn't change. "That's fine, we can check that out. For now, we need you to come with us to the car," the taller one said, taking a step closer to Jordan. Fear bloomed in Jordan's chest. This wasn't right. He was in his own yard. He hadn't done anything wrong. "Can I please go get my mom?" he asked, his voice smaller now. "After we verify some information," the shorter officer said, reaching out to take Jordan's arm. Jordan flinched away instinctively, dropping the remote control. Flash, still powered on, shot forward and bumped into the officer's shoe. "Hey!" the officer exclaimed, startled by the toy car. "I'm sorry," Jordan said quickly. It was an accident, but something had changed in the officer's demeanor. The taller one stepped forward and took Jordan's arm firmly. "You need to come with us now." "But," Jordan began, tears springing to his eyes. "No arguments," the officer said, leading him toward the police car. "We're going to contact your parents, but right now you need to cooperate." Jordan looked desperately toward his house, willing his mother to look out the window to see what was happening. But the windows reflected only the cloudy sky, giving no indication of whether anyone inside could see him being led away from his own yard. As they reached the police car, Jordan heard the screen door of his house bang open. He turned to see his mother standing on the porch, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror as she took in the scene. Her son, being placed in the back of a police car, in their own front yard. "Jordan," she called, her voice sharp with fear. "What's going on here?" The shorter officer turned toward Diana. "Ma'am, please stay where you are. We're conducting an investigation." Diana's expression hardened as she strode across the lawn, her work badge still hanging around her neck. "An investigation of what?" "That is my 11-year-old son, and this is our home." As Diana reached the police car, Jordan could see the mix of fear and fury in her eyes, the controlled tremor in her hands as she faced the officers. In that moment, despite his own fear, he felt a strange sense of security. His mother was here now, and she wouldn't let anything bad happen to him. What Jordan couldn't know was that this moment, this ordinary afternoon turned extraordinary, would soon ripple far beyond their yard on Magnolia Street, reaching all the way to the halls of Congress where his father was at that very moment, arguing for the rights and protections that his own son now desperately needed. Diana Taylor stood her ground, her professional demeanor barely containing the storm of emotions beneath. She'd ended her therapy session abruptly when she heard unfamiliar voices in her yard, and now she faced two police officers who had her son in the back of their patrol car. "I'm Dr. Diana Taylor," she said firmly, her credentials badge still hanging around her neck from her virtual session. "This is my home and that is my son. I demand to know what's happening here." The taller officer maintained his authoritative stance. "Ma'am, we received a call about a suspicious person in this yard. We're just following protocol." Diana's eyes narrowed. "A suspicious person?" "My son was playing with his toy car in our yard." Her voice was steady but lined with steel. Years of helping children through trauma had taught her how to remain calm in crisis, though she'd never imagined needing those skills for her own child. "We need to verify residency and guardian status," the shorter officer explained, his hand still resting near his holster. "If you could provide some identification, you want me to prove I live in my own home?" Diana interrupted, disbelief coloring her words. She took a deep breath, centering herself. "My ID is inside. I'll get it. But first I want my son out of that car. Ma'am, we need to follow procedure." "No!" Diana cut in, her patience fraying. "My son is 11 years old. He was playing in his own yard. There is no procedure that justifies putting him in the back of a police car without contacting his parent, who was inside the house." She pointed to the house. "You could have knocked on the door. You could have asked to speak with an adult. Instead, you frightened a child who was doing nothing wrong." From inside the police car, Jordan watched through the window, his eyes wide and scared. He'd never seen his mother like this, her normally warm voice now sharp with authority, her kind face set in hard lines. It was both comforting and terrifying to see this side of her. The officers exchanged glances, clearly reassessing the situation. The taller one spoke into his radio again while the shorter one maintained his position. "Look," Diana said, modulating her tone, "I understand you're responding to a call, but surely you can see this is a misunderstanding. That's my son. This is our home. I'm happy to show you my ID, but I want Jordan out of that car right now." After a tense moment, the taller officer nodded to his partner, who opened the back door of the patrol car. Jordan scrambled out, rushing to his mother's side. Diana wrapped an arm around him protectively, feeling his small body trembling against her. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, before looking back at the officers. "Let me get my ID. We'll be right back." "Ma'am, we need to—" the shorter officer began. "You can wait right here," Diana said firmly. "We'll be less than a minute." With Jordan pressed against her side, Diana walked back to the house, maintaining a deliberate, unhurried pace despite her racing heart. Only when they were inside with the door closed did she kneel down and pull Jordan into a proper hug. "Are you okay?" she asked, pulling back to look at his face. "Did they hurt you?" Jordan shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I told them I live here. I told them about Dad. They didn't listen." Diana wiped his tears away with her thumbs. "I know, sweetheart. I know." She took a steadying breath. "I need you to be brave for just a little longer, okay? I'm going to call your father, then we'll go back outside and sort this out." Jordan nodded, trying to be strong, though his lower lip still trembled. Diana grabbed her phone and her wallet, then punched in Robert's number. It went straight to voicemail. He was likely in session with the committee. She sent a text instead. "Emergency. Jordan detained by police in our yard. Call now." Then she found Robert's business card in her wallet, the one with all his congressional contact information, and took Jordan's hand. "Let's go." Outside, the officers were still waiting by their patrol car, though their posture had changed slightly, less aggressive, more uncertain. Two neighbors had come out to their porches, watching the scene with concerned curiosity. Diana handed her driver's license to the taller officer. "Here's my ID showing this address. And this," she said, holding out Robert's business card, "is my husband's congressional office information. Congressman Robert Taylor. Perhaps you've heard of him?" The officers studied the card, and Diana could almost see the realization dawning on their faces. The House Judiciary Committee was currently overseeing police reform legislation her husband had helped draft. "You can call his office to verify," Diana continued. "Or you can tell me who made this call about a suspicious person, so we can clear up this misunderstanding." The officers exchanged another look. The taller one cleared his throat. "That won't be necessary, ma'am. It appears there's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, Diana repeated, her tone flat. Is that what we're calling it when an 11-year-old black child is detained by police for playing in his own yard? Before either officer could respond, Diana's phone rang. She checked the screen. Robert. Excuse me, I need to take this. It's my husband, the congressman. She emphasized the last word just enough to make her point, then stepped a few feet away with Jordan still holding her hand. Robert, she said into the phone, her voice finally breaking slightly. There are 2 police officers in our yard. They put Jordan in their car. He was just playing with his toy. As Diana spoke quietly into the phone, the officers conferred with each other in hushed tones. Their body language had shifted dramatically. Gone was the authoritative stance, replaced by something that looked almost like discomfort. Mrs. Patel had come outside now too, along with Mr. Wilson. They stood at the edge of the Taylor's yard, silent witnesses to the scene unfolding. Yes, he's okay, Diana was saying into the phone, scared but not hurt. I don't know who called them. Yes, they're still here. She looked up at the officers. My husband wants to speak with you. The taller officer took the phone, his hello, sir, noticeably more deferential than any tone he'd used with Diana or Jordan. As the officer listened, his face changed, the color draining slightly. Yes, Congressman. No, sir, I understand. Of course, sir. Diana pulled Jordan closer to her side, whispering reassurances. She watched as the officer handed the phone back, now looking distinctly uncomfortable. Congressman Taylor would like you to know he'll be home in 20 minutes, the officer said stiffly. He's already contacted your captain. Diana took the phone back. Thank you. Is there anything else you need from us, or are we free to go back inside our home now? The shorter officer stepped forward. Ma'am, we were just responding to a call, and I understand that, Diana interrupted. What I don't understand is why your first response was to put my son in your patrol car instead of speaking with an adult. Or why, when he told you he lived here, you didn't believe him. The officers had no good answer for this. After an awkward moment, the taller one handed back Diana's license. You're free to go about your day, ma'am. We apologize for the disturbance. Diana nodded curtly and turned toward the house, her arm still protectively around Jordan's shoulders. She could feel the neighbors' eyes on them as they walked back to their front door, could hear the murmurs starting. Inside, Diana led Jordan to the kitchen and sat him down at the table. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured him a glass of water, the professional calm she'd maintained outside beginning to crack now that they were alone. Are you really okay? She asked, sitting beside him and taking his hands in hers. Jordan looked down at the table. They thought I was a bad guy, didn't they? Because of how I look? Diana felt her heart breaking. This was the conversation black parents dreaded, the loss of innocence that came too soon. She and Robert had tried to protect Jordan from this reality for as long as possible, but here it was, crashing into their lives despite all their precautions. Some people make wrong assumptions based on skin color, she said carefully. It's not fair and it's not right. But it happens, and that's why your dad and I have given you those special rules to follow with police officers. But I did follow the rules, Jordan said, his voice small. I was polite. I kept my hands where they could see them. I told them who I was and about Dad. It didn't help. Diana squeezed his hands. You did everything right, baby. This wasn't your fault. Not at all. Then why did it happen? Before Diana could answer, they heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway, doors slamming, hurried footsteps on the porch. Robert burst through the front door, his face a mask of controlled fury and concern. Jordan? He called, his deep voice echoing through the house. We're in the kitchen, Diana answered. Robert appeared in the doorway, still in his suit and tie, his congressional pin glinting on his lapel. For a moment he stood frozen, taking in the sight of his wife and son sitting at the table, both safe but clearly shaken. Then he crossed the room in 3 long strides and gathered Jordan into a tight hug. Are you okay, son? He asked, his voice rougher than usual. Jordan nodded against his father's chest. I'm okay, Dad. Robert held him for another long moment before pulling back to look at his face. I'm so proud of you, he said. You were brave and did everything right. He turned to Diana then, reaching for her hand. And you? Are you all right? Diana nodded, though tears had finally begun to spill down her cheeks. I'm angry, Robert. So angry. I know, he said, squeezing her hand. Me too. Robert pulled out a chair and sat down with them at the kitchen table, loosening his tie. The formal, powerful congressman was gone, replaced by a worried father trying to process what had happened to his family. "I spoke to their captain," he said, "and I called our lawyer. This isn't over." Outside, Flash still lay abandoned on the lawn beside the homemade ramp, the afternoon's joy now overshadowed by an ugly reality. The peaceful neighborhood continued its routine. The mail carrier delivered letters. Children rode bikes. Dinner preparations began in homes up and down the street. But inside the Taylor house, something had fundamentally changed. A line had been crossed and innocence lost. As the family sat together at their kitchen table, each lost in thought, they couldn't know that this painful afternoon would soon become a catalyst for change, far beyond their quiet street. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence as Robert made phone calls from the living room. Jordan sat at the table, pushing his dinner around his plate without eating. Diana watched him with concern, her own food barely touched. "I'm not hungry," Jordan said quietly, setting down his fork. Diana reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "That's okay. It's been a hard day." From the living room, they could hear Robert's voice rising and falling as he spoke to people at his office, the police department, and their family lawyer. Words like unacceptable and accountability drifted into the kitchen. The doorbell rang, startling them both. Diana rose to answer it, pausing to touch Jordan's shoulder reassuringly as she passed. On the porch stood Mrs. Patel and Mr. Wilson, along with 3 other neighbors. Mrs. Patel held a chocolate cake, and Mr. Wilson clutched a card. "We wanted to check on Jordan," Mrs. Patel said, her eyes full of concern, "and to let you know we're here for your family." Diana felt a rush of gratitude as she invited them in. The neighbors filed into the living room where Robert was just ending his last call. He looked surprised but pleased to see them. "What happened today was wrong," Mr. Wilson said firmly, handing the card to Robert. "We've all signed this. It says we're witnesses to what occurred, and we're willing to make statements if needed." Robert took the card, visibly moved. "Thank you. This means more than you know." Mrs. Patel set the cake on the coffee table and went to the kitchen doorway, where Jordan was watching shyly. "We brought your favorite, chocolate with fudge frosting," she said warmly. "Because brave young men deserve cake, even on hard days." For the first time since the incident, Jordan smiled a little. "Thank you," he said quietly. The unexpected support from their neighbors changed the atmosphere in the house. As they all gathered in the living room, sharing cake and discussing what had happened, the isolation the Taylor family had felt began to dissolve. They weren't facing this alone. After the neighbors left, Robert sat beside Jordan on the couch. "Son, I need to ask you something important. How would you feel about sharing what happened to you today? Not just with our neighbors or our lawyer, but more widely?" Jordan looked confused. "Like on TV? Possibly," Robert nodded. "What happened to you today happens to many young black boys across this country. But you have something many of them don't. A father who can help change things. The bill I've been working on addresses exactly this kind of situation, but many of my colleagues don't understand how real and harmful these incidents are." Diana sat on Jordan's other side. "You don't have to decide right now, and you don't have to do it at all if you don't want to. This is completely your choice." Jordan was quiet for a long moment, thinking, would it help other kids like me? Robert's eyes glistened with pride and sadness. "It might. I believe it would." "Then I want to do it," Jordan said, his young voice steady with determination that belied his years. That night, after Jordan was finally asleep, Robert and Diana sat at the kitchen table, talking in low voices. "I never wanted him to become the face of this issue," Diana said, wrapping her hands around a mug of tea. "I've worked with children who've been traumatized by police encounters. I know how this can affect them long term." Robert reached for her hand. "I know. But Jordan's stronger than we sometimes give him credit for. And his story matters. The son of a congressman detained in his own yard. It makes the point I've been trying to hammer home in committee for months." "Just promise me you'll protect him," Diana said. "No extended interviews, no making him relive it over and over." "I promise," Robert said firmly. "One statement on our terms, and then we focus on helping him process this and move forward." The next morning, Jordan stayed home from school. Robert canceled his committee appearance, sending a brief statement explaining why. a personal family emergency related to the very issues the committee was discussing. By noon, rumors were already swirling through Washington's political circles. Robert's phone rang constantly. Diana fielded calls from concerned friends and family. Jordan stayed close to his parents, unusually quiet, occasionally looking out the window at his abandoned RC car still lying in the yard. At lunch, Robert set down his phone with finality. "It's time to make a statement before the rumors get out of hand." "Are you still sure, Jordan?" Jordan nodded solemnly. "I'm sure, Dad." Robert drafted a statement with input from Diana, careful to use language Jordan could understand and approve. They decided against a press conference, opting instead for a written release with one carefully controlled interview with a journalist they trusted. By mid-afternoon, the statement was public. "Yesterday, my 11-year-old son was detained by police while playing with a toy car in our front yard. Officers responded to a call about a suspicious person without attempting to contact any adult in the home. My son identified himself and explained that he lived there, but was nonetheless placed in a police car until my wife intervened. This is the reality for Black families in America, even those with resources and privilege. As I return to work on the Police Accountability Act, I do so not just as a congressman, but as a father whose son has now experienced firsthand the bias our legislation seeks to address." The response was immediate. News outlets picked up the story. Robert's phone exploded with messages from colleagues, many expressing shock and support. By dinner time, the incident had become national news. As the family ate a quiet dinner, trying to maintain some normalcy, a car pulled into their driveway. Robert looked out the window and sighed. "It's Chief Reynolds," he told Diana, "the police chief." "I should talk to him," Diana nodded. "I'll stay with Jordan." Robert went outside to meet the police chief, a tall man with salt and pepper hair who had been in his position for nearly a decade. They spoke on the porch, their conversation visible but not audible from the street where a few reporters had already gathered. Inside, Jordan asked, "Is Dad in trouble for telling about what happened?" Diana shook her head. "No, sweetie, your dad is doing exactly what he should do. He's making sure people know what happened so they can make changes to prevent it from happening to other children." The meeting lasted nearly an hour. When Robert finally came back inside, his expression was both tired and determined. The chief apologized, he told Diana when Jordan had gone upstairs to get ready for bed. He's launching an investigation into the officer's conduct and the dispatcher's handling of the call. He's also agreed to implement immediate additional training on bias and community relations. "That's something at least," Diana said. Robert nodded. "It's a start, but it's not enough. Not nearly enough." Later that evening, as Jordan was getting into bed, he asked the question that had been weighing on him all day. "Dad, who called the police on me?" Robert sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. "The new family that moved in down the street? They didn't know us yet, and they made a very wrong assumption based on how you look." "Because I'm Black," Jordan said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes," Robert answered honestly. "Because you're Black." Jordan was quiet for a moment, processing this. "That's not fair." "No, it's not," Robert agreed. "And that's why we're fighting to change things." "Will they ever change, though? Really change?" Robert looked into his son's eyes, seeing wisdom and pain beyond his years. "Yes," he said firmly, "they will. Because of people like you being brave enough to tell your story. And people like your mom and me and many others working to change laws and hearts. Change is slow, but it does come." Jordan seemed to accept this, at least for now. "Can I go outside tomorrow? To play with Flash? Or—" The question caught Robert off guard. After what had happened, he'd half expected Jordan to want to stay inside, away from prying eyes and potential danger. But here was his son, still wanting to be a normal kid, still wanting to play in his own yard without fear. "Absolutely," Robert said, his throat tight with emotion. "It's your yard, son, your home. No one has the right to make you feel unsafe there." Jordan nodded, satisfied with this answer, and snuggled down under his covers. Robert leaned down to kiss his forehead, then turned off the bedside lamp, leaving the door cracked open the way Jordan liked it. Downstairs, Robert found Diana in the living room, watching the news coverage of their statement. The reporter was standing across the street from their house, gesturing toward the home where their family was trying to maintain some privacy and normalcy amid the growing storm. "How is he?" Diana asked as Robert sat beside her. Stronger than I was at his age, Robert replied. He wants to play outside tomorrow. Diana smiled sadly. Of course he does. He's a child. He shouldn't have to be afraid in his own yard. Robert took her hand, both of them watching as their private family moment became part of a national conversation about race, policing, and who gets to feel safe in America. Tomorrow, Robert said, I go back to the committee with a new perspective and a stronger resolve. This bill has to pass, Diana. It has to make real changes. It will, Diana said, squeezing his hand, because now it's not just political for you. Now it's personal. Outside, the news vans lined the street, their lights illuminating the quiet neighborhood. Inside, a family tried to find their way forward, balancing a child's need for normalcy with the reality that their experience had thrust them into a spotlight they never wanted, but would now use to drive the change they'd always fought for. And upstairs, Jordan slept, his dreams filled not with police cars and fear, but with the simple joy of a boy racing his toy car across the grass, free and safe in the sunshine. 3 months had passed since that spring afternoon when Jordan's world had changed. Summer had bloomed across Washington, D.C., bringing with it hot, humid days and thunderstorms that rattled the windows of the Taylor home. Jordan sat on the steps of the Capitol building, swinging his legs as he waited for his father to emerge. The massive stone edifice had once seemed like a mysterious place where his dad disappeared to work each day. Now, after several visits, it felt more familiar, impressive still, but no longer intimidating. A group of tourists passed by, snapping photos. One woman pointed at Jordan and whispered something to her companion. Jordan pretended not to notice. He'd gotten used to being recognized over the past few months, though he still didn't much like it. His mother sat beside him, checking her watch. Almost time, she said, smoothing Jordan's collar. He was dressed in his best clothes, a button-up shirt and khaki pants that made him look older than his 11 years. Do you think it will pass? Jordan asked, squinting up at the bright sky. Diana sighed. I hope so, sweetheart. Your father has worked very hard on this bill. That was an understatement. Robert had thrown himself into revising and championing the Police Accountability Act with renewed vigor after what happened to Jordan. Late nights, weekend work sessions, countless meetings with colleagues on both sides of the aisle, all of it driven by the image of his son in the back of that police car. The doors opened, and people began flowing out of the building. Jordan stood up, scanning the crowd for his father. When he spotted Robert walking down the steps with a group of other representatives, he could tell from his expression what had happened before his father said a word. Robert broke away from the group and approached his family, his face tired but triumphant. It passed, he said simply. By 7 votes. Diana stood and embraced him. You did it. We did it, Robert corrected, pulling back to include Jordan in the moment. All of us. The Police Accountability Act had gone through numerous revisions over the months. The final version included requirements for bias training, new protocols for responding to calls about suspicious persons, accountability measures for officers who violated those protocols, and funding for community policing initiatives. It wasn't everything Robert had initially wanted. Political realities had necessitated compromises, but it was a solid step forward. And crucially, it included what had come to be known as Jordan's provision, a specific requirement that officers attempt to contact adults when responding to calls involving minors on residential property. How do you feel? Robert asked Jordan as they walked toward the car. Jordan considered the question seriously. Happy, I guess. But also kind of weird. Like it's good the law changed, but it's strange that it happened because of me. Robert nodded, understanding his son's mixed feelings. Sometimes change happens because regular people find themselves in situations that allow them to make a difference. You didn't ask for what happened to you, but you helped turn it into something positive. As they drove home, Jordan gazed out the window at the Washington Monument rising in the distance. His father had explained that laws weren't magic. They couldn't instantly change how people thought or acted. But they were tools, important ones that could help shape a better future. When they arrived home, a small surprise awaited them. The neighbors had gathered on their front lawn with a banner that read, "Congratulations." Mrs. Patel had baked another chocolate cake, and Mr. Wilson had brought his famous lemonade. We watched the vote on C-SPAN, Mrs. Patel explained, hugging Diana. We're so proud of your family. The impromptu celebration spread across the front yard, the same yard where Jordan had been detained 3 months earlier. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone, but there was something healing about reclaiming this space with joy and community. As the adults chatted, Jordan slipped away to the garage and returned with Flash, his remote-controlled car. He hadn't played with it much since the incident, but today felt like the right time to bring it out again. He set up a simple track using sticks and stones, just as he had that day. The familiar weight of the controller in his hands was comforting. He pressed the button and Flash zoomed forward, kicking up tiny bits of grass. "Cool car," said a voice behind him. Jordan turned to see a boy about his age standing nearby, watching with interest. It took him a moment to recognize him as the son of the family that had moved in down the street, the same family who had called the police on him. In the weeks after the incident, that family had come to apologize. Jordan had stayed upstairs while his parents spoke with them in the living room. He'd heard the words sorry and assumed and never meant for this to happen, but he hadn't felt ready to meet them face to face. Now, looking at the boy, Tyler, he remembered, Jordan felt an unexpected absence of anger. This kid hadn't made the call. He was just another boy who liked cool toys. "Want to try?" Jordan asked, holding out the controller. Tyler's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? You'd let me?" Jordan nodded. "It's easy. Just don't crash it into the flowers or my mom will make us both pull weeds." Tyler laughed and carefully took the controller. His first attempt sent Flash spinning in circles and both boys chuckled. "Gentle with the joystick," Jordan instructed, showing him how to make small adjustments. "Like this." From the porch, Diana noticed the interaction and nudged Robert. They watched silently as the two boys took turns racing the car around the makeshift course. Their earlier wariness giving way to the universal language of play. "That's unexpected," Robert murmured. Diana smiled. "Children are often better at moving forward than we are." As the afternoon wore on, more neighborhood kids joined in. Jordan organized a tournament, setting up increasingly complex obstacles for Flash to navigate. The sounds of children laughing filled the yard, drowning out the memory of stern police voices and frightened tears. Later, as the gathering wound down and neighbors began heading home, a police car drove slowly down the street on routine patrol. The officer inside gave a respectful nod to Robert, who acknowledged it with a slight wave. It wasn't friendship or forgiveness. Too much had happened for that. But it was civil recognition, a small sign of the changing relationship between the community and those sworn to protect it. That evening, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, Jordan helped his parents clean up the remains of the celebration. As he gathered paper plates from the coffee table, he noticed a newspaper his father had brought home. The headline read, "Police Accountability Act Passes. Congressman's Personal Story Changes Minds." Below the headline was a photo of Jordan standing beside his father at a press conference they'd held shortly after the incident. Jordan barely recognized himself in the picture. He looked so serious, so much younger somehow, though it had only been a few months. "Dad?" Jordan asked as Robert came into the room. "Do you think things will really be different now?" Robert sat down on the couch, patting the spot beside him for Jordan to join him. "Change happens in stages," he said once Jordan was seated. "This law is an important step, but there will need to be many more steps after it. The important thing is that we've started walking in the right direction." Jordan thought about this. "And we'll keep walking? Even though our part is over?" "Our part isn't over," Robert said firmly. "This was never just about what happened to you, though that was what opened my eyes wider. It's about making sure all children feel safe in their communities. That work continues." From the kitchen, Diana called that dinner was ready. As they moved to the dining room, Jordan paused to look out the front window at the yard where everything had changed. Flash sat on the coffee table, battery charging for tomorrow's adventures. The yard looked so ordinary, just grass and flowers in his mother's cherished garden. Yet it had become something more, a place where a painful moment had transformed into purposeful action. At school, they'd been learning about historical figures who changed laws and policies. Jordan had never imagined he might become part of that tradition. It felt too big, too important for a regular kid who just wanted to play with his RC car. Yet here they were, his family's name attached to legislation that might help other children avoid what had happened to him. "Jordan, dinner's getting cold," his mother called again. "Coming," he replied, turning away from the window. As Jordan joined his parents at the table, he realized something important. They were still just a family having dinner together. The newspaper headlines and political victories didn't change that core truth. They were still Jordan and Diana and Robert Taylor, trying their best to live good lives and make a difference where they could. Outside, darkness fell over Washington, D.C., the lights of the capital city twinkling against the night sky. In offices throughout the city, copies of the newly passed Police Accountability Act sat on desks waiting to be implemented. In police departments across the country, new training requirements would soon be announced. In countless homes, families like the Taylors would continue to have difficult conversations about race, safety, and justice. Change would come slowly, unevenly, with steps forward and occasional steps back. But it would come because of countless small moments of courage, like a boy who shared his painful experience, a congressman who let it change his perspective, and a community that chose to stand together rather than divide. As Jordan told his parents about his RC car tournament and his tentative new friendship with Tyler, he felt something that had been missing for months, the simple joy of being a child unencumbered by fear or spotlight. There would be more challenges ahead, more work to do, but tonight, in this moment, he was just a boy having dinner with his parents, and that perhaps was the most powerful victory of all.